Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm glad to see you all here. And today is our second episode of a special edition of the ACNS YNS webinar on the research methodology. So thank you very much for all of you to join us today. Today, our chair is Professor Ashish Kumar, who is the Surgeon Educator Assistant Professor of Cerebrovascular and Vascular Surgery in the Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center, University of Toronto in Canada. Our expert speakers today, the first speaker is Professor Alberto, who will be talking about the clinical research principles. Our second speaker is Professor Raja, who will be talking about the topic of from results to publications. Our third speaker is our YNS speakers, Dr. Marchesini Nicholas. His topic will be my experiences in publishing a research work. The discussions of today, we have Professor Otani Sensei, who is the clinical professor, the Division of Neurosurgical Surgery, Department of Neurosurgery of Nippon University's School of Medicine. He's also the Vice President and Chief Manager of the Center of the Brain Tumor and Skull-Based Lesions of the Nippon University Hospital, Japan. Our second discussion is Professor Kozadin, who is the Professor in Neurosurgery of the Department of Neurosurgery, the Nikkei University School of Medicine in Tokyo, Japan. So shall I invite Professor Kumar to introduce our first speaker?
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure to have Professor Alberto Felitti speaking about research and clinical research principles. Alberto is known to everyone else here and across the Asian Congress platform. It'll be very nice to hear about his philosophy in clinical research. So, Professor Alberto, over to you.
Thank you, Ashish. And thank you, Ben. Thank you for the invitation. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay. I think it's shared now.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Good. So I was asked to talk about principles of clinical research. So it's not an easy topic, especially because this talk should be directed to young neurosurgeons. So it's not an easy topic. Why? Because for two reasons. First, because it might sound quite boring initially. It is not actually very exciting to talk about basic principles of clinical research. And second reason why it is a difficult topic is because regulations on these basic principles on clinical research are becoming more and more strict all around the world. So let's start giving a definition of human research, because if we are talking about clinical research, we are talking about research on human beings. So the World Health Organization gave this definition: any proposal relating to human subjects, including healthy volunteers, that cannot be considered as an element of accepted clinical management or public health practice, and that involves either physical or psychological intervention or observation or collection, storage, and dissemination of information relating to individuals. So this is the definition of human research. And we will see very soon that knowing the principles for a good clinical practice doing research on human beings is crucial. It's crucial for many reasons, not only because if you don't follow these principles nowadays, you will have a very hard time in presenting your results in congresses or publishing your results in journals, because there are some requirements about these principles. but also from an ethical point of view. So as this talk is directed mainly to young neurosurgeons, I hope I will be able to deliver very basic principles about how to start conducting a clinical research. So there are some 14 actually principles of good clinical practice when we do this kind of research. The first one is related to ethical principles. So I'm talking basically about the Declaration of Helsinki. Of course, we have to follow some ethical rules before starting a project and during the conduction of the research. The second principle is scientific justification. So, of course, if we have an idea about a clinical research, behind this idea, there must be a scientific justification. It cannot be just, curiosity, personal curiosity, which is not linked to something clinical related. Third principle is you must foresee risks conducting this kind of research. So you have to be able to identify potential risks for this research. Then, of course, the anticipated benefits of your research should outweigh the risks of the research itself. The fifth principle can be maybe confused with the first one because it's again about ethics, but if you notice, it's different. The fifth principle tells you that you must have an approval by an independent ethics committee. So it's not like you have to judge by yourself about the ethical principles, like the first principle tells you. The fifth principle tells you that you need a third party. You need someone who is not biased with the research and who is independent and who can approve your research from an ethical point of view. Then, of course, you need your protocol to be approved. And you need to get informed consent from the individuals involved in the research. And the eighth principle tells you that benefit-risk profile should remain favorable. Again, also this principle can be confused with principle number 4. But the principle number 4 tells you that you, before starting the research, you have to anticipate that benefits should outweigh the risks. And this principle tells you that you have to check this balance also during the research. So during the research, this benefit-risk profile must be in favor of benefits. Again, you need your personnel involved in the research to be qualified and duly licensed from a medical point of view if there are doctors conducting this research. And you also need to be sure that the individuals involved are well educated, that they can understand all the basics of the research they are involved into. Also, all the clinical trial information must be recorded. This can be obvious, but sometimes we miss some data and we don't track all the steps of our activities. It's very important also from the scientific point of view, but also from a legal point of view, that you record all the steps of your research. Of course, confidentiality of records should be protected. And you have to make sure about the good manufacturing practice if you are using some medical devices. Again, you must be sure that the quality of every aspect of the trial is guaranteed. And let's start from the very beginning, after seeing these basic principles. So how can we move from an idea to actually a project of research, of clinical research? So the first point is to pose a research question, to make an hypothesis. So look at this manuscript, the title of this manuscript. The title says, Recurrence following neurosurgeon-determined gross total resection of adult supratentorial low-grade glioma, results of a prospective clinical trial. So from the title is very clear what is the hypothesis of this clinical research, and which is this one. How is gross total resection subjectively determined by the neurosurgeon affecting low-grade glioma recurrence rates? So you must start from a question. So this paper started from this question, for example, from this hypothesis. The other step is developing a research protocol. And during the development of this protocol, every aspect of the protocol must be very clear. I want to give you some examples. So, for example, you have to identify the population involved in your research. Is it a research about children, about adults, about the elderly people? This must be very clear in your research protocol. Also, the intervention, if there is an intervention, is there a medication involved, or are you checking a device or a service? And then a comparator. Are you comparing a drug with a placebo, or are you comparing different treatments, or a treatment with a standard of care? Again, outcomes must be very clear. Are you measuring an economical outcome, or maybe more often in our cases, a clinical outcome or a humanistic outcome? And about timing, of course. Also, timing must be very clearly defined in your research protocol. If it is short-term, intermediate, or long-term. And also, of course, the setting. Are we considering outpatient or inpatient, and is it long-term or not? So about the research protocol, you have also to very well define the working team since the beginning. This is very, very important. You cannot start a research without defining the working team beforehand. This is something that happens quite often, actually, but if you don't define the working team since the beginning, then you can have problems later on during your research and lose time. So, for example, it is crucial to identify a statistician for planning for the design of your study. I remember when I started my career in research, I made this mistake many times. So I just started my research plan, collecting data. And after I collected all data, I, of course, needed a statistical analysis. So I contacted the statistician. But very often, at that point, the statistician might tell you that he needs data to be collected in a different way. So you have to lose time reanalyzing your data for a second time. So it is really very important for you to involve a statistician since the beginning of your research, before beginning data collection. So he can help you in the design of the study. And also the administrative staff are key figures for developing correctly your research, your trial. Otherwise, you might encounter during your research some unexpected problems that can be solved very easily if you have involved an administrative staff beforehand. Also, the other step, as we have seen before, is to obtain an approval by an ethics committee. So usually institutions and hospitals have their own local ethics committee. And it is of the utmost importance that you submit your research design to the ethics committee at the beginning of your research, because it is required nowadays by basically all journals. So ideally, if you conduct a research, you want to do that because when you get the results, you want to publish the results. So you will not find any journal anymore available to publish your results, even if they are really brilliant and game changer results, if you don't have a local ethics committee approval. And of course, you need to get this approval not after you collected the data. That's too late. You might have problems if you do that. You need to think about this step beforehand. And this is important because this committee can have a non-biased evaluation on your research and on your research design. It is essential to create a database where data can be collected in a simplified form in order to be able to reprocess them for statistical analysis and synthesis. And data analysis is often simplified by creating tables, diagrams, or group of data so that it can be presented to the reader in a clearer way. Then, of course, after these preliminary steps, you have to prepare a research report. As you can see, this research report has some chapters, some very specific paragraphs that, of course, can remind you the paragraphs of a paper, of a scientific paper. And it is very, very important that you arrange your research report in a very clear way. You need an introduction where the research topic and the context are stated very clearly, and also your hypothesis must be very clear. The question you started from before beginning your research. Then if you included a literature review, you must include the key theories and concepts and how you made your literature reviews. The methodology must be clearly stated. You must clarify immediately your research design and the methods of data collection, and also, of course, the techniques for data analysis. So again, the importance to have a statistician helping you since the beginning. And then the findings. So you have to present your data, you have to analyze your data, and then after presenting data, you have to discuss the findings. So these, as you can see, are very precise steps that must follow this precise order. And then at the end, the conclusions. So a summary of key findings and implication for the future research. There are also some quality requirements for your research. As we are talking about the basic principles of clinical research, this slide is very, very important. So your research must be effective, must be efficient. So these two terms are very similar, apparently. They both mean capable of producing a result. but there is a very tiny difference between these two terms. Effective means producing a result that is wanted, and efficient means capable of producing desired results without wasting materials, time, or energy. So these two qualities are very important for your research. And also, your research must be safe, of course, for the patients and also for the personnel who is conducting the research. Must be equitable towards the individuals involved in the research. Must be reproducible. This is the key principle of scientific method. And must be patient-centered. So the patient must always be the main aim, the main concern during your research. There are different types of studies. You can have observational studies or clinical trials. So observational studies are studies that aim to identify and analyze patterns in medical data or in biological samples. And clinical trials, which are also called interventional studies because there is an active role of the researcher, are studies that test the safety and effectiveness of medical intervention, like medications, procedures, surgeries, medical devices, and so on. As we know, observational studies include prospective cohort studies, case control studies, retrospective case series, case reports, but also analysis of sources of data, the so-called systematic reviews, and survey studies. Interventional studies can be randomized clinical trials or non-randomized clinical trials. And I want to move towards the conclusion of my talk about basic principles of clinical research, giving young neurosurgeons some useful tools, hopefully some useful tools. You can find these tools in basically any journal website. I selected, for example, YNS website. If you click on for authors or instruction for authors, you can find this kind of web page with guidelines for figures, for references, for tables, for videos, also the manuscript types that that journal accepts, and a revision checklist. And if you check these websites, usually you can find this sentence: when preparing their manuscript, authors should follow reporting requirements specific to their subject matter. These requirements, guidelines, at least in the case of YNS, can be accessed via this link, Equator Network website. But in other journals, they provide you directly these forms to be filled in. What am I talking about? I'm talking about some checklists that must be filled up to be able to submit your research. For example, as you can see, if your research is a randomized trial, there is a specific form which is called consort. If you have an observational study, you have to be able to fill up this 𝒀𝒏𝒔 protocol. Systematic reviews needs a �prisma, and so on. Even case reports have their own protocol to be followed, like the CARE protocol. So let's have a quick look through some of these protocols. For example, the 𝒀𝒏𝒔. The 𝒀𝒏𝒔 is required for observational studies. As you can see, there is a number of checking points, and you have to read all of them, and you have to make sure that your research clearly follows these rules and is able to give an answer to all of these issues. For example, the title must be clear, indicate the study design. You see, the background and rationale of the study must be very clear in the introduction and the objectives as well. About the methods of your research, the study design must be presented very clearly. The participants, the variables, and so on. No need to go through all these single chapters, but I want to show this to you because if you don't know this since the beginning, you might end up in doing a lot of work to conduct your research and then be stopped when you have to submit your paper because you maybe missed some of these parts in your research or in your manuscript, and you have to lose time, more time than expected. Very often, the journals require you not just to read these statements, this checklist, but also to indicate in these forms where the specific item was reported in your manuscript. So you have actually to write the number of the page where you reported about the single items. So again, making a clear design and a clear plan of your research is very important before starting your research. So please, my advice is to read these kind of checklists based on the study you choose to perform in order to be able to answer all the specific items along this list. So as you can see, there are many different, no need to go through all of them. I prefer to focus on the challenges in clinical research. Nowadays, as you can see from this very nice paper by Peter Black, he says that the trial development system and the publication trials in scientific journals is more and more complicated by different factors that characterize the modern academic world. Let's see what makes this clinical research more complex nowadays. Increasing regulatory control, as I told since the beginning, increasing malpractice costs, consolidation of expensive care, decreasing reimbursements, and also decreasing governmental funding. Also, a decreased involvement of neurosurgeons in scientific review committees. This is a problem. And an increasingly bureaucratic system. So all these make contemporary clinical research more difficult to be performed. And we have, unfortunately, to point out that we all know money talks also in this field. So without money, it's very difficult to conduct research properly. So I just want to give young neurosurgeons some hints, some advices, how to get over this kind of problem, economical problem. Of course, there are international research founders, the NIH, but also European and Asian foundations. Very often, these kind of founders, require very strict design protocols. They have a blinded review process. So I know that it is not easy to be funded by these founders, especially if you are a young neurosurgeon. But there are other possibilities. For example, national institutes. Here I am showing just two of these Italian institutes, the Telethon Foundation and the Italian Association for Cancer Research. So if you look at national institutes, maybe it is easier to apply for some fundings. And even more simpler, way to get some fundings is to look for local funders. Again, these are just two examples of my area in Verona. In Verona, in the Verona area, there are some local foundations that can provide some financial support to your research. Of course, you have to follow up their websites. You have to check when they publish some grant and if the grant can be applied to your research. But if you regularly follow up this kind of opportunities, you might be able to get some fundings by these local funders. So what are, in my opinion, the future perspectives of clinical research in neurosurgery? Of course, clinical research must be face more and more the cell-based approach. Also in neurosurgery, we all know this. So this is one potential field for the future. But also the use of big data is becoming more and more frequent also in our field. And it is a very promising research field. We are able to get very, very useful results by analyzing big data. And of course, nowadays, we know artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning are becoming very, very popular, also in the field of neurosurgery. So I think the future of clinical research in neurosurgery goes towards these directions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Alberto. That was an excellent summary of how to go about writing a research protocol. I would say it also a lot depends on how your residency program is structured when you are a young neurosurgeon, when you are actually doing your residency. For example, here, because I did my residency from India, so there is no incorporated research time during your residency. I think that is the time where one gets exposed to various research methodologies, how to write a protocol. Clinical research is mainly based on a few case series and case reports during the residencies. But when I'm coming to the North American side, I see that there is dedicated time for research. So I think that becomes very, very important. If there's a 6-year residency here, the residents will spend 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in active clinical research, and then they join back the program. So they will go through the first year, second year, third year in clinical residency, and then they will be out of the residency program, but they'll be part of what we call a surgeon scientist program. So that is a program which is funded by the university, and where you will be paid for as you were during during residency, and you will be allowed to do research for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. And when they come back for the final 2 years when they are PGY5 and PGY6. So I think the system also supports such kind of clinical research, and I'm sure the same thing will be in Europe. In countries like India, I found it very difficult as a resident to navigate through clinical research, and basic scientific research even becomes more difficult. But thank you so much for going through all the necessary steps which are needed before you form a study, because I also probably have gone into situations where after preparing and after having the data, someone asked me, what is your methodology? So when you don't know the methodology which goes to your research protocol, and once you go to the research protocol, the first question is, what is your research question? So I think this is very important to know for young neurosurgeons, that whenever you are writing or planning a study, research protocol is the first thing which you do. And in that research protocol, the first question is about your research question. And that research question will essentially guide your methodology and the whole protocol. So it's very important to focus on that. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite our discussants, Professor Ohtani, if you have some comments on Professor Alberto's presentation.
Thank you for the, Professor Ferretti. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, for explain so very clearly about the clinical research principles. So so in particularly, so in Japan, the ethics committee is very so strictly, and so recently in Japan, the administrative procedures became very strict. So in particular, we need approval by the ethics committee in hospital for such as off-label use drug delivery or randomized prospective study designed. So how is the situation in Italy?
Yes, thank you, Professor Ohtani.
So how long do you need to accept the so approval from the ethical committee? How long do you need?
Yes. So first of all, it's good to see you again, Professor Ohtani, and thank you for your comment and for your question. Actually, as I mentioned during my presentation, these bureaucratical steps involving also the ethical approval are becoming more and more complex, also in my country and in Europe in general. You mentioned about the problems if you want to use something off-label, for example. So I recently published a letter to the editor commenting a paper by Yamashiro sensei about the use of flexible endoscopes. He published a very brilliant paper about the off-label use of an angiographic catheter put inside the operative channel of the flexible endoscope to aspirate intraventricular hemorrhages. And I wrote this letter to the editor not only to congratulate Yamashiro sensei, but also to point out this problem of the off-label use of medical devices. So I don't know in Japan, but here in my country, in Europe at least, we have a paradox. So if you talk about drugs, there are specific regulations determining how to do if you want to use a drug off-label. Okay, so if you want to use a drug off-label, you can, because there are some regulations. Of course, you have to apply your request to the ethical committee. You have to wait. You are asking also about the timing. You have to wait. Sometimes you have to wait some months, actually. That's why in my talk, I suggested young neurosurgeons to think about this ethical committee approval beforehand, because sometimes it takes months to get the approval. But if you are using a surgical device off-label, the paradox in Europe is that there are no regulations on this. So in the past years, the hospitals, the institutions, and the ethical committees were managing this kind of studies about medical devices in an easier way, more relaxed way. So they usually approved this kind of off-label use of medical devices. But in the last years, they are more restrictive. And the regulations did not change. Basically, there are no rules in European Union about the off-label use of medical devices, but the attitude of the ethical committees changed. They are becoming more strict. So they say, in the past they said, okay, there are no regulations about this, so okay, you can do it. And now they are saying there are no regulations, so you cannot do it. We have to wait for someone to give a regulation. So I am noticing this kind of changing in the attitude of ethical committees. No one wants to get the responsibility, you know. Also from a medical legal point of view and economical point of view, because you need insurances for patients, you know.
I'm very sorry to complicated question. I'm sorry.
No, thank you for the question, because actually young neurosurgeons and also not young neurosurgeons must know about this problem, because it's an increasing problem. I don't know in other areas of the world, but in the European Union, it's an increasing problem.
Yeah. And one question, more one question. So how do you find such research topics? So for example, so daily reading meeting or so how do you find the research topics?
So you mean the ideas for research?
Yeah. How do you get?
It depends on the topic, actually. So more often, this is a good question, actually, for young neurosurgeons. So how to get the ideas? I think the best ideas come from daily practice. So if I'm doing surgery and I notice that the tools I am using are not so effective to do that, then maybe I can develop an idea about the tool. Or if I find a disease, or I see that the outcome of my patient is not as expected, this is also a way to get an idea. Or if I see a very strange case I have never seen, I ask maybe elderly colleagues if they have encountered the same situation. Maybe they didn't, or they did only once or twice in their lives. And maybe it's a good way to go deeper into that kind of situation, search the literature, see if other colleagues published about that topic. Sometimes also talking about different topics with colleagues, with friends who are not doctors, might give you some ideas. For example, 3 years ago, I think, I published a paper about the correlation, quantitative correlation between neural networks and the networks of the galaxies. Very strange topic. How did they get this idea? Because one of my dearest friends is an astrophysicist. And so we were talking about our jobs. And sometimes you have very fertile cross-fertilization, so you can get very interesting ideas, also talking about different topics which are not directly linked to neurosurgery.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ohtani. I'll just give an example here in medical education world. Again, when you go one step, this is a question which is actually one step before the step of forming your research question. So if you form a research question, why you are forming the research question? So there is actually in medical education world, we call this as problem, gap, and hook heuristic. So they say before you start any kind of research, first you have to identify what's the problem. If what you are in, like Alberto said, in clinical day-to-day cases or clinical environment, what is the problem someone is encountering? Once you know the problem, you need to know why that problem exists. So now you come to the gap. So then you say, okay, this was the problem because this was not there. So that's the gap which we are discussing. And then the last part is the hook, where you decide your intervention, that my intervention is the hook which will solve this gap, and which will actually cover this gap and solve the problem. So we are always used to in medical education world, we are always used to think about before you start any kind of research, why do you want to do the research? Has there been someone already has done that kind of research? Then what's your research adding to the world of literature? So these questions are very, very important. And thank you so much for asking that question, that, how do you get these ideas? So I think it's a confluence of multiple factors, but it basically is driven by what problem you are facing in clinical world and what is your solution to it. And if there's nothing done in the previous past history, then your research question will stand validated. Thank you so much. And now I'll move to Professor Kostadin to add his comments on Professor Felberto's talk.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thank you very much. Yeah, but it was a really interesting talk, particularly last webinar. We very well focused on the yeah, has to be spoke about that, and I'm really really surprised and aware of the off-label use in Europe of the. It was a revelation for me from Alberto. Now, Alberto managed really in a really short time to focus on so many important things on the subject, but this subject is enormous, and there might be definitely many other questions. Particularly, I would like to mention two small things only. The first is the matter about the conflict of interest and the biases that will occur, because the ethical committees are not completely aware how to counteract them from the very beginning. So you have to be aware and price that. And a second point is that clinical research is done on some kind of population set in general. This kind of population, which is the subject of the research, can be a single patient for a case report, or really randomized enormous. But in both cases, we have some kind of representative or sample population that we have to define at certain points. So that I find a very important point in clinical research as a definition. Otherwise, I think our young neurosurgeons will benefit a lot from what has been presented by Alberto. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kostadin.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for the enriching discussion. Now, I would like to, now we know about the clinical research principles. So the next speaker will talk about how to move the research results which you have got, and how to move that to publication. So I would like to invite Professor Raja Kuti, who is a professor at the Government Medical College, Trivandrum, and again does not need any introduction. He'll be talking about from results to publication. What are his thoughts on that? And I would invite him to share his presentation, and the stage is set.
Thank you very much, Ashish, for this wonderful introduction, and I'm extremely indebted to Prof. Yoko, our president, who has given me a chance for presenting this webinar. First of all, let me confess, after Alberto, to present this topic is a very difficult job. And of course, he has made many things easier for me as well as difficult for me. So with your permission, I will share my screen. 1 second. Okay. So since our honorable speaker, honorable chair was already asking about ideas and publications, so I would like to focus on the point of view of a young neurosurgeon. from where do they get these ideas and how to materialize it into print in a publication. So first of all, let me say that good writing is a poetry. It just flows spontaneously, like Professor Michael Lawton, who describes the nature of AVMs in the words like AVMs are freaks of nature, explosions of hemodynamic energy, red fury with dilated arteries converging from all directions, like angry snakes and gorge twisting, throbbing from turbulentions and glistening arachnoid will, concealing the tangled beast within. So it's very few people can write like this so beautifully. In other publication by Jacques Marcos, where he describes complications in neurosurgery, he describes the preventable complication as in the second category that grabs you from inside, that accesses your emotions, your heart and your soul, and that threatens the resolve and the stamina of the healer you are meant to be. It is the preventable complications that make you ponder, question, analyze, replay again, and find that very moment in the procedure where you wandered away from the path of perfection, if there was one, or you can make a new discovery, unfortunately in retrospect, a new path of perfection that would have led to a much happier outcome. So who can write like this? I really envy those people who can write like this. But let me say, these are all, they are gifted writers. They are inherently rich in their verbal currencies. It comes very naturally to them, unlike very few, but they are also very talented and they have a lot of parallel reading as well. Well, like lesser mortals like us, we have to bring, for bringing our ideas into print, we should sweat it out in the group with a lot of motivation, reading, putting our ideas into action, and of course perseverance. So where do ideas come from? Newton might have just enjoyed the apple rather than evaluating the cause and deriving such a complex formula. But in general, ideas come from passion, motivation, reading, friends, mentors, experience, previous studies, and of course out of the box observations. As our first speaker Alberto already said, that daily practice is one of the most important factors that generate ideas in general in neurosurgery. For examples, it was the observation of the accidental electrolytic detachment of steel electrode when trying to induce aneurysmal electrothrombosis. Guglielmi developed the detachable coils. The idea of James of treating the observation that James Parkinson observed that tremors disappeared in the arm of a person while shaking palsy after a hemiplegic stroke led to the surgery of Parkinson disease after ligation of anterior carotid artery as well. The observation by Feather Serbinenko of the balloons floating in the sky during the May Day celebrations led to the ideas for detachable balloons in neurosurgery. So these were all geniuses. We are children of lesser God. We have to repeatedly read and accumulate knowledge. I'll tell you, as Alberto said, where do ideas come from? For me, it also came from my own general practice. This lady on the left with the CTK walked up into my room with a history of headache, and we found that she had a chronic subdural. And we advised her to undergo surgery, and we put a twist drill. But midway the surgical procedure, she developed seizures. It was under local, of course, and we had to stop the procedure. And on the right is the image after twist drill. You can see there is a bit of bleeding. So I had read in the past about the use of tranexamic acid by Professor Kageyama, and we gave her tranexamic acid and it just disappeared in a matter of 1.5 months, which led to the further study of us, which we published in 2020. This is one of the largest studies that examines the outcome of medical management of CSDH with Tranexamic. This is a very interesting case that walked into my room. This patient had a VP shunt, but the story goes that this patient had some history of headache. He is originally from Kerala, and he boarded a flight from Kerala to Dubai, but he had a mild headache 2 days back also. But when he landed in between the flight, he became unconscious. And when he was here in Dubai in one of the hospitals, they took a CT and found it was a colloid cyst. So somebody put in him a VP shunt, and then he recovered fully, and he was sent back to India for further surgeries. So when the patient narrated this story, I thought, well, I have heard this thing before. I have read this thing before. So I went back to literature, and there are several case reports where air travel with colloid cysts have been reported. Strangely, it was one of the pilot's case that that caught my attention, where a pilot had a severe headache and the co-pilot took over the flight, and upon reaching the hospital, the pilot was dead. So there are only 5 reports of colloid cyst with a fatal outcome in flyers. Thereafter, we published this in 2020, Flying with Colloid Cyst, a cautionary note. This is another very interesting case, a patient of about 38-year-old who came to me with a history of assault, and she gave the history that she had a shunt in the childhood when she was 5 years old. But I palpated her scalp and I found that there was no tube. So I just took a shunt series X-ray and found the entire shunt assembly was lying in the abdomen. So I asked her whether, do you know that such a thing has happened? And the relative of the bystander, who is the bystander, said that the tube was not palpable about 2 to 3 months after surgery. But since she did not have problems, and the doctors of course advised them to undergo reposition, but they did not, and they just lost follow-up. And she came here nearly after 25 years to us with an unrelated problem. So we presented this. So this is another very interesting change in density of colloid cysts. Only 3 case reports are available in the world regarding this. Is out of the box observation that I observed. Now this has further led to a study that we are going to publish ahead. So reading is the gateway to writing. At least for me, it has been like that. Because I read, I can infer and I can accumulate knowledge and I can correlate with the things happening around. So when you have these ideas, you nurture these ideas and you let them grow within you. You build an environment for it to adapt. You make plans and try to accomplish it into action. Always keep a standard. As you see, there are so many publications. One man's trash is another one's publication. So you always keep a standard. This is a beautiful editorial written by 𝑷𝒓𝒐𝒂𝒂 in last this year March, and he remembers his first publication and he writes about it. I remember my first publication was accepted in a major journal. It was 86 and it was a Journal of Neurosurgery. That acceptance letter said to me that I belonged. What I had written was believed by the field to be worthy of inclusion, worthy of reading by serious neurosurgeons, and worthy of adding to the archived foundation of our specialty. So that is what feeling that is. So you must write something that should be worthy of reading. But unfortunately, it is not the state of affairs as of now. In the words of Jacques Marcos, that he presented in the recent cerebrovascular symposium, talk is cheap. Words are losing their meaning in the current literature, and the worlds of science, biases, and marketing are dangerously overlapping. So how to have good knowledge in neurosurgery? First, there are no shortcuts here. So, but there are a few other things that you can do. This is for the young neurosurgeons. So join all the free societies like CNS, AANS, and all of them EANS. They have a very good journal team and they all publish all their articles on the social media. You can take and read, and you can take their membership and invest in your own expansion of knowledge. Use your own institutional library, and do not underestimate the cumulative effect of incremental knowledge that you acquire through this means. Of course, regular reading, there is no other shortcut to that. You must always read what is your interest and what is happening in and around. The best thing in circle of neurosurgical writing is to read, listen, learn, educate. This is very important. Once you have formed the ideas, what to do is you write the protocol, submit it to institutional review board or the ethics committee, you take the consent, approval, and then you go ahead. So once you just start on day one instead of one day. Stick to your protocol. The abstract is the most difficult thing to begin with. It should be precise and meaningful, restrict the words, and it should give the maximum information. As you know, introduction part of the article is very important. The storyline should be concise and clear. You should avoid repetition of the abstract and let the readers know about plot. Professor Walid, who is the editor of one of the leading journals, writes, the introduction section of the scientific manuscript should be less than or equal to 5 sentences. Cut to the chase and say when you perform the study. Materials and methods is the plot. How did you arrive at the plot? Introduce your characters, you tell a detailed storyline and explain every twist and turns that you will see in the results. The results should be very clear. Everything about which was mentioned in the materials and methods should be there. You should have your percentages in volumes. The tables and graphs should be simple and digestible, not complicated. And statistics is very important. In the publication world, in God we trust, but rest of all should bring data. So if you are not good, you can seek help from the statistician. As Alberto pointed out, it is very important to seek the help of the statistician before you start the study. So because a good statistician will make a world of difference. Numbers are after all like people. Torture them enough and they will tell you anything you want. The discussions are very important. Adhere to what is relevant to your findings. Do not go after distractions and avoid straying, because on the reading you will find so many other things that you want to write, but just stick to your plot there. The referencing part of the article is very important. There are several ready-made software available, Mendeley, Zotero. This is one of the most difficult for beginners. At least for me it was very difficult until I learned by myself how to do referencing. And always keep a master file, and when you are exporting that master file for publication, you export out of that software. Only then you will be able to edit outside the software when there are any corrections in the final manuscript. What are the do's? The do's are honestly write your findings, avoid plagiarism. The actual software that detects plagiarism differ from each journal to journal. Usually 3, 4 or sometimes even 5 words in consecutive order will be picked up as plagiarism, and today we have very sophisticated software that pick up even the images whether they have been manipulated or not. You must limit to the words limit and allow others to criticize freely. If you are a junior, you always show it to a senior, so they will have more inputs into your existing work. And others adhere to the principle of publication of images. This is very important. If a journal says you give your images in such and such quality, you must give it to that. And unless of course it is when it is exceptional, like this one we published in 2017. Now this is a case of posteriorly epidural migrated lumbar intervertebral disc fragment. So once we missed this finding in another patient, but this is the second patient. You see, I am just drilling a part of the spinous process and I am taking out the disc because I know it is posteriorly migrated. So the Journal of Spine Surgery rejected this video from the original file, and they said that this does not meet the quality standards. And actually I wrote to the journal editor and said that even though it does not, but this is a very exceptional video. You will never find, or this such type is never ever reported in the literature. And finally they accepted and published it, to my surprise even. What are the don'ts? You avoid duplication, unethical practices, and of course fragmentation of results and plagiarism. Now On the left is a article published in 2017. On the right is a one which is published in 2019. And after publication in 2019, the original author from the 2017 wrote to us that these images have been totally ditto and picked up, and most of which is plagiarized from our article. And when we did a search on the plagiarism match, it was shown 100% of the text was matching the old source. So we had to retract this journal, this article from our journal. So what are the most important causes of retraction after 2010? They are plagiarism, duplication of article, and compromised peer review. And the most common subspecialties are oncology, spine, and trauma, followed by vascular and others. So there is a website called retractionwatch.com. Now they will flag all the retractions, what in whichever journal, they will flag it on their website. It's a non-profit organization, I think. This is one of the very recently retracted journal, just for the simple reason that a signature was missing to completely approve the project from the IRB. So the reasons can be plenty, even if flimsy reasons such as a missing signature to even so much of plagiarism. But that's why you should be always careful and follow the rules. You must adhere to the principles of publication, as most of which have been already detailed by my good friend Alberto. It is okay if the manuscript is short, provided it is insightful. You can use the writing softwares like Grammarly and all, which can improve your writing and give suggestions. Or you can also choose language editing services from journals, which are very common and comes at a price. But start with a medium and good journal. If you are in the low and middle income countries, don't try to sell technology to the West, unless of course when it is path breaking. And never give up. The earlier, when there were no such many journals, the average rule that 3 into 3, that 3 corrections and 3 resubmissions, you think that that journal is not, that publication is not worth, the article is not worth for publication. But this rule does not apply now. There are a million journals that would accept any publications, but you keep your standard high. This talk wouldn't be complete if I don't say about authorship. The authorship is the biggest elephant that sits in the room that nobody talks about. In a collaborative research, this is most important. And whenever there is a collaboration, the first question would be, what will be our authorship? The ICJME, which is clearly recommends that authorship should be based on the following 4 criteria: either substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or acquisition, analysis or interpretation of data and work, and drafting the work or revising it critically for important intellectual content, and final approval of the version to be published, and agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So if you are writing, you are the first author. Give due credit to whosoever was involved in writing the manuscript. If there was a non-clinical person, do acknowledge them, and stop forced or rented authorship. So there are so many ads like this which pop up on your social media sites and all. I would just like to say, don't go after it. It's not worth. So once your name is tarnished in a plagiarism or anything, it stays forever on the internet. So be very careful about taking this shortcut. So what is the future of writing? The future of writing is very scary and concerning according to me, because this is an AI generated manuscript. When I asked the AI to just write so many words about medulloblastoma, and look, it just came up in very beautiful way. So there is a concern. I don't know whether what will be the future of writing with AI in medical literature. There are so many softwares readily available, like Paper Digest, Elicit, background remover for images. Use them judiciously and also cautiously. Now, in neurosurgery, our publications, success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm, as said by Winston Churchill. So there will be failures, but you should not give up. So originality is a byproduct of sincerity in publication, and in the world of academic writing, never stop. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't walk, if you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Raja, for that insightful lecture. I think as you were going through the slides, I was correlating myself at many steps that the same problem encountered when I was going to write this, I was going to write that. So it's an amazing lecture. Thank you so much. What happens after you have collaborated your research, and then how to submit it for publication and how to not give up is very important for young neurosurgeons. I see Dr. Ben's hands up, so I'll just take the question first of all. Please go ahead, Ben.
Yes, Roger, and thank you for your presentation. It's again, it's a very good advice to us for paper writing. I'd like to echo to you that now with the AI, specifically like the ChatGPT, that it may create a problem to the authors and also the scientific committee of the journal. And but as far as I know, using this tool must be very cautious, because there are other software that should be able to detect the use of the ChatGPT in writing the paper. So again, it's very important to be aware of this. So high fidelity is suggested for the paper. Another thing is that I would like to add that another useful tool to write a paper is to use a citation machine. The citation machine is easy for you to quote the reference. It's not about writing the paper, but sometimes when you would like to quote the reference in a specific format, the use of a citation machine may be considered to make your paper writing a little bit easier. Yeah, that's my comment. Thank you, Roger, again for your advice.
Thank you so much, Ben. I see a few more hands up. Alberto?
Yes, thank you, Ashish. Actually, I also want to give a very short comment. Raja, wonderful presentation, as always. And listening to your presentation and watching to the slides you have shown us made me think that maybe we can give another good advice to young neurosurgeons who want to publish. You said very clearly, and also I try to advise young neurosurgeons about the contents of the research plan, the ideas, the hypothesis where they have to start from. But it is also very important how you present your data in the manuscript, from the title throughout the abstract and the manuscript itself. You can have wonderful results, great data, but if you are not able to present them in an appealing way, maybe the reviewers will undervalue your job. Of course, this is not the main part of the job for a researcher, but also the ability to present in a proper way what you have to say is very important. And your slides made me think about this comment, because also a presentation can be delivered in many different ways. exactly the same message can be delivered in different ways. And your presentation with many images catch the attention. So I think a good message for young neurosurgeons is try to catch the attention of the readers, not be boring in presenting your data. Try to find a good title, essential but catching the attention. Try to write proper sentences in the abstract. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you so much. I see one more hand raised up. Go ahead, Ikechukwu.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Professor Kumar. Yeah, good evening, Professor Yokokato. Thank you so much for all you are doing all over the world. Thank you, Ma. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, professors and colleagues. Thank you, Professor Raja, for that wonderful presentation. It's very, very interesting, rich in content, powerful in delivery. I have a question, please. How long, when is a work considered late for presentation? For instance, there's this work I did 6 years ago. For some reasons, I've been unable to publish the work. It had been presented in an international conference, and it was judged a good work. So, thank you so much.
Your voice was not clear, but I can infer that you did some work in the past. You have not published it, and you would like to publish it now after a gap of 5 years, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So the best answer to that is it still relevant? Okay. That is the best question that you should ask yourself, whether the work that you did 5 years, is it still relevant in the realm of neurosurgery? That currently, has anyone else published it in these 5 years? And as I said, whether I always quote the words of Prof. Kunjulka, is it worth reading by your own peers in this neurosurgery? So this is a question that should be answered by you, because I don't know what is the topic of your research, and I may not be able to answer that. So this is a question that should be answered by you, by evaluating the thing I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Please, I'm Ikechukwu, a young neurosurgeon from Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Otani, any comments on Professor Raja's talk?
Hi. Thank you. Hi, Raja.
Hi, Professor Rani.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
thank
yes.
you for your presentation about importance of the paper working. So during daily clinical work, based on your own experience. So in my personal experience, so case report is very, very important for young neurosurgeon, you know. So I usually tell them, so the research topic and the theme is right in front of you. Right in front of you. So you have to get the knowledge and so experience clinical patient during daily working, because you have to notice the noise of the from your patient in front of you. So how do you think about so case report, the importance of the case reports, you know, for the young neurosurgeon? Of course, after your presentation, so many young neurosurgeons have to notice the importance of writing the case reports. So, but again, please, so you understand? Yeah.
I understood, Prof. So that is a very important question. But as you all might have experienced yourself, most of the researchers who are stalwarts now must have, of course, started through case reports only. So
Yeah.
that is the first ladder that you step into the world of publications, which is a case report. So case report itself is sometimes becomes so exhaustive that people may give up entirely on publication after after so many failures. So case report is very important, and writing and guiding them properly for us is the most important thing that I feel.
And one more question. And how do you choose papers? How do you choose the papers for the first publication or the first submission?
You mean how do I choose the journal?
Yeah.
Journal. Okay, right. So if you are, that depends on what is the area of research that you have done. As I said, if it is like very high and it never been reported in the world, just aim for the sky. Go to the Red Journal Neurosurgery. But if it's okay, like you want your article to be, which is of course it may be rare, but it is not so published so much. You can go for a low-level journal and or a low to mid-level journal. So I think that is it depends on how good your research is.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sensei.
Professor Constantine.
Thank you very much for I will just mention briefly very few points, but they're really in sequence. Like about I completely agree about the submissions, and I completely agree that higher level journals should be first, because in addition to that, we will learn from the reviewers. The reviewers are going to tell us a lot how to improve our paper. And the second thing about the submission is write short. These journals have to accommodate certain number of articles in certain volume. Definitely in equal circumstances, a smaller article will get in. So remember writing short. That is a very good merit for academic writing. Regarding the comment of Ben, definitely we have to use the so-called reference management journal. The young neurosurgeons can input this kind of term, reference management software, in Google, and they will get several softwares which are working perfectly with that. Some of them are free of charge even. Now, I would like to mention also about case reports. Case reports are definitely the direct primary goal for young neurosurgeons to start. Now, everybody focus on the rarity and the uniqueness of our case presentation. However, the uniqueness of by itself is not probably the biggest merit. I think that saying, okay, I have been seeing a blue elephant, and you will never see that again because it is so rare, I don't think that has implications for practice. I think that saying what this observation of the blue elephant is helping how to manage all elephant problems and other things, how our daily practice, clinical practice, will be influenced by this special case, I think this is much more important. So we have to focus very much at the end of discussion and conclusion of these reports. This is the big mastery of case report. And finally, I would like to mention also another problem that exists recently, and this is the so-called relationship between open access, which is already becoming somehow a practice for so many journals, and people have to pay for open access. In fact, that allows a group of journals, so-called predatory journals, to use that system to obtain funds by very mediocre reviewing and just publishing somewhere in the internet, which will never get publicity. So this phenomenon has to be avoided by young neurosurgeons very carefully. In fact, evaluating previous publication in these kind of journals, what kind of impact, where they have been appearing, cited, and so on. So we have to get accustomed to open access, but we have to be very careful with that. So that were my comments. Otherwise, I will just congratulate Dr. Raja for his very valuable personal experience that he shared with us. and I think we will remember a lot of what he has seen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kostelin.
Professor Pirzad?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Raja, for excellent presentation, and it was very useful. And also, Professor Alberto, just I like to know your opinion about the costing or charging the fees for publication of a research or a topic. But you know, some high-rank journals charging fees, and it's a barrier for and also a challenge for young neurosurgeons and also for low-income countries, and how to find a sponsor or how to do to make a pre-charge or make a sponsorship. Is it possible? And also the other my second question about how to find a good journal, because you know, in this century we find a lot of fake journals that they offer, as you mentioned before, offer that's for calling for abstract and charging fees, low fees, but that's are fake. And what is your advice for finding a good journal for publication? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prof. Pirzad. Now, this is one of the most intriguing problems that is faced by the low and middle income countries, the very high fees of publication and all. But I would like to also mention that most of the journals, if you write a genuine request of waiver of publication fees, most of them will actually agree. Okay, if your work is good, they will really agree, and most of them may not be, the fees may not be waived fully, but at least you will get a discount of around 50-20%, especially if you are from a low and middle income countries. Now, this is a very valid issues that we have faced in the past, we are still facing, but of course, as we know, the journals also need to survive. Okay, there are so many journals. The journal, running a journal is a very difficult job. It needs a lot of money, and because the publication company charges the society for a fees, and the publication is never free. And of course, I cannot like, I'm so grateful to Prof. Yoko Kato. I don't know the number of waivers that we have given. The Professor Yoko Kato has been very kind and generous for the young neurosurgeons, and she has been in the forefront of this. So Prof. Kato was exceptional in bringing the publications of the youngsters in the LMICs, and see to that it is published in the ACNS or any other journal that the requests come to. Thank you.
If I may, my opinion about this very important and delicate problem that Professor Pirzad brought up. So I am a strong opponent of paid journals. Of course, I know that there are costs behind publications, that's clear. But we have to distinguish those editors who want to make money from researchers, because there are many and they are increasing. So one point is there are costs that must be covered by the journal to publish the papers. And another thing is to make money from the work of researchers. So the researchers make the job, and they have to pay to get their job published by people who get money, not only to cover the costs, but because their job is to get money from the work of someone else. And we know this happens. Some of these journals have been listed among the predators. We know. And many of these journals have been withdrawn from the impact factor list by Clarivate maybe 1 year ago. So for this reason, I have a strong criticism about this system. Also because paying for publishing might build up another problem, which is the fact that only people who have money can publish, and they publish because they need the publications to get higher positions in their career, to get academic progression. So it's like a vicious circle. I don't think this is good for science at all. And for this reason, to answer Professor Pirzad's question, my behavior is always to submit to journals where I don't have to pay fees. Usually, you have to pay fees if you want your paper to be open access. I don't, and of course, open access can be good to increase your citations, because more people will read your paper and you can have more citations in the future. But I really don't think it should be the researcher to pay for that. Maybe the institutions can have a deal with the journals if they want the papers to be read by their personnel, their researchers. So in my career, I think I published open access 1% of my papers. And I always aim, as Raja said, if the paper is good, and I believe it's good, okay, point to the sky, as Raja said, go for Journal of Neurosurgery or Neurosurgery. You can publish to those journals without paying any fee, unless you want open access. But I usually don't choose open access for that reason.
I would
Thank you
like
so
to
much.
know the views of Ashish in this regard.
So, I mean, interesting thoughts, but I think there are still a lot of journals which publish without the processing fee. And I think it's just a matter of finding a good journal for your publication. So when I was, as you know, Journal of Neurosurgery has started a journal just for case reports. And it has and all the papers which will come there will have a article publication fee. So it's a very, very difficult topic, because it's giving you a platform for publishing case reports, which some journals don't even accept. They will clearly write that we do not accept case reports, and which is again a point of discussion, because I like case reports not being allowed to publish in your journal, how fair it is for people across the world. But because everyone, as Raja said, like starts from case reports, and same with me. I remember during my fellowship in 2010, before I went to Fujita, I had 0 publications. I remember that very, very clearly, because I had so much data with me. And when those 3 months, when I came out of that, I had at least 15 because I had all the data with me, which we presented in our neurological society committees on citywide rounds, on national. So all this presentation was there with you. But because there was no kind of a stimulus in residency, I'm talking about 15 years back, we used to just work. But then we had time during our fellowships, and we were actually encouraged by Professor Kato to write and publish when you have free time. We used to, write a lot. So it is very, very difficult. But I think, as Alberto said, I do not also opt for open access, because I also do not believe that somebody has to pay But it sometimes, and with few of the residents, when they do not find a platform to publish a case report, then certain times I have accepted that at Journal of Neurosurgery Case Reports Journal, for example, because it gives you a valid platform, and they do not modify their criteria to just get the money out of you. They will actually make sure that it goes through a proper peer review process, and if it is good enough, then only they will accept it. So it's an opportunity. It's a highly debatable topic, Raja. I mean, I don't know whether I answered your questions, but it's very difficult to know, because once you're at one hand, you are getting your paper published in Journal of Neurosurgery, even if it's a case report journal, and other hand, you have to pay some fee. But as you said, if you write to them and if it's really relevant, they will waive off the article publication fee. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. This was such an interesting topic. I think it hits home. All of us have gone through so many hoops and struggles, and written to editors to waive off our fee. I think all of us have that in common. So that brings to our last topic of the day, and I'm seeing Dr. Niccolò Marchesini basking in sun for almost a couple of hours now. So he's all ready to go, and he'll talk about his experiences in publishing a research work. So after that brief introduction and overview by Professor Raja, over to you, Niccolò, who is actually working as a consultant neurosurgeon in the University of Verona, Italy. Over to you, Niccolò.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the kind invitation to this webinar. I will try to be short and stay aligned with the title that was assigned to me. And in these 10 minutes, I will literally talk about my real personal experience in publishing research work. And I will try to do it from each step of the research process. So from conceptualization to publication. And some things will be repeated because they were already mentioned by the previous speakers. And I will do this presentation from the perspective of the young neurosurgeon with a strong clinical background that believes that doing research is not only an important activity per se, but it's fundamental to become better doctors overall. So I will base my discussion on some concrete personal mistakes I did and sometimes still do in research and the lessons I learned. So the first step in the scientific process is, of course, the definition of the research topic, and this can be more tricky than one can expect. Indeed, on a personal perspective, I believe important, even before the definition of a research topic, to find as early as possible in our research journey the research area or areas that passionate us most. When we find those areas, it becomes much easier to stay updated, to gain expertise, to find trends in the literature that will help us in defining specific research topic with clear scopes and boundaries. So personally, I started, as many colleagues, as most of you mentioned before, with simple case reports that happened around me. And I initially found difficult to find ideas for my research and people to collaborate with. And only later I discovered the areas that intellectually were more stimulating for me. And this is still helping me a lot to stay updated, creating networks of colleagues to collaborate with, and to define research topics that can be relevant and feasible. So after having clear in mind our research area and having defined a potential research topic, we must be aware of what's already out there about this topic, and the literature review is essential to identify gaps and unresolved issues that our research can address. So at the beginning, I started with the basic literature searches in PubMed without any clear strategies. And sometimes I realized too late that I spent hours in preparing a research idea for something that was already existing or not worth investigating. And also initially, I was not confident in discriminating high quality resources from low quality papers. And by becoming more experienced, I learned that the time for a proper literature review, literature search is a good investment, possibly relying on multiple databases. And if we are not well trained in something, we have many resources that can help us at this stage, including podcasts, YouTube channels, and so on. So selecting an appropriate research design is fundamental in ensuring the validity and the reliability of any research findings. And before starting any research project, it is fundamental to define a specific research question and define objectives and all specifics like sample size, study duration, and all the aspects that were already mentioned today. In my personal experience, it happened to me in the past to enthusiastically start some data collection under a very general idea for research. But at the end, I realized to have collected so many data, they were sometimes useless, as I realized only afterwards that they were not complete or adequate, or they were not aligned with what I was looking for. So I learned that even for some simple research projects, it's essential to write down a study protocol, including a detailed method section that can guide us along all the project and help us in saving time and conduct our research properly. Data collection. So accurate data collection and rigorous analysis are fundamental steps to drawing meaningful conclusions for research. Personally, with my first research projects, I started collecting data in Excel sheets, and it happened several times to end up deleting a column and realize this only at the end, or making some mistakes in filling some cells and realize this only at later stages. Also, for my first project, I tried to choose and do the statistics on my own, refreshing my statistics lessons in medical school. However, this approach costs a lot of time without ensuring an adequate quality. And at the end, I simply admitted to myself that I am just a neurosurgeon and that we have great colleagues out there that can help us in this very difficult task. So, about data collection and analysis, I realized that it's fundamental to use well-designed case report forms to avoid mistakes and lose data, and to store them in safe database, just to say one red cap. I also learned that involving statisticians, since the design of research is not an admission of personal weakness, but rather involving them since the beginning of a project can help to improve the quality and save a lot of time at the later stages. When writing the manuscript, it is fundamental to adhere to a clear and structured format, such as introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And it is also fundamental to focus on conveying findings concisely while maintaining clarity with a simple, clear language. So with my first papers, I tried to translate my verbose Italian into English. However, this often resulted in loss of conciseness and extensive writing. And I also tried to put a lot of information within the text, sometimes repeating in the discussion some information of the introduction or vice versa, or repeating in the text what was already there in the tables, without thinking that the readers and of course the reviewers don't want to lose too much time and are rather willing to go straight to the point of the manuscript. So after some rejection, several rejections, and becoming a reviewer myself, I understood that readers and reviewers appreciate clear and concise manuscripts. So I learned to make a logic scheme of what I want to say and to communicate it in short but clear sentences. Also, I learned to let cooling down my manuscripts a couple of days or a couple of weeks after finishing it, and before reading it again and to finally submit in my view. This helps to see the article with a more objective perspective before definitive submission. So once the manuscript is ready, it is important to submit it to an appropriate journal for peer review. Peer review obviously ensures the quality and integrity of research before publication, and feedback from reviewers finally strengthens the robustness of the work. Personally, at the beginning, I lost weeks or even months every time I submitted in simple case reports to big journals like the Red Journal or Journal of Neurosurgery. And every time the journal sent back the article saying that something was missing in submission, and at the end, the editors even didn't send out the article to reviewers because it was not enough interesting for the journal's audience. So at the beginning, I also felt more frustrated than now from a rejection or major revision comments. Finally, I learned to be realistic and more pragmatic about the quality and possible impact of my research, to carefully read and follow the instruction for authors of the journal. And I also learned that if I pedantically responded to the comments of my reviewers, they were happy in most cases, and there were high possibilities for acceptance. Another thing I learned is that the process from submission to publication can take a lot of time. And in this interval, it is better to start or proceed with other projects rather than stay and wait. So publication marks the culmination of any research project, and it is right to celebrate it properly and acknowledge all the people who were involved. But for scientific purposes, dissemination is even more important, as it ensures that the findings reaches a wider audience. In my initial experience, I still remember the happiness I had when I published my first case report and seeing my name in PubMed. And of course, this motivated me a lot in doing more projects and so on. However, at the beginning, I was somehow shy about sharing those achievements with my colleagues and the scientific community. And by the time passing by, I understood that science is not something that we do only for ourselves. Each of us put a grain of sand on the top of a mountain that we stay there forever, and will hopefully help our future colleagues to add their own grain of sand. So nowadays, we have plenty of channels to disseminate our research, from webinars, seminars, conferences, social networks, and so on. I conclude with ethics. So ethical conduct is paramount in research and must guide every stage of the process, from design to dissemination. And authorship ethics and proper acknowledgement to the contributor should be something negotiable. In my past experience, it happened to me not to be able to publish a paper because I realized too late that an RB approval was necessary. And for that, and it also happened to me to receive some indirect and unfortunately also sometimes direct pressures for involving people as authors without respecting authorship criteria. And personally, in that case, I prefer not to publish the article and maintain the integrity of my research and of myself, rather than just put the name of a person that was not involved at all in the research process. So after these experiences, I obviously learned to verify the necessity of an IRB approval during the first phases of the research project, and to avoid losing time and energy afterwards. And finally, I learned to choose very carefully the people I want to work with, and defining since the beginning roles, responsibilities, and acknowledgements will avoid to find yourself in very unpleasant situations sometimes. So I conclude with a quote. Of course, each stage of research plays a crucial role in the journey toward producing meaningful and impactful research, but has inherent pitfalls that go well beyond the few concepts I presented today. And I hope that the mistakes I did may help somehow some of the youngest colleagues to avoid repeating those errors. So this quote comes from a biochemist who won the Nobel Science for the discovery of vitamin C. I like this quote because it captured the essence of research process, emphasizing the importance of originality, innovation, and critical thinking. The quote says, "Research is to see what everybody else has already seen and to think what nobody else has thought." And this is the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Niccolò. That was kind of a summary of today's day. And I really enjoyed how you use your personal experiences to showcase, the problems which you can encounter and how you can learn from those problems or obstacles. Professor Otani, I would like to invite you to add some comments.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Niccolò, so for your good presentation to clarify the importance of the clinical work based on your own so experience. So my question is, so what do you think about the most important things to keep the motivation to continue the clinical work? So do you think about it?
So the question is, what is the motivation to continue with clinical?
To keep the motivation. What do you think about the most important thing is from your so yes, it's okay to from your own experience.
Okay, yes. My main motivation is when I find some interest results in research, of course, and to be conscious that those results can be useful for further research. So this motivates me more to continue with something more. Of course, it happens to find also negative results, and it's sometimes I stop and loss of motivation. But it also negative results sometimes stimulate me more to do more research on this.
Yes, I agree with you. So to notice negative data. So usually, so we make the research system or the research program to get the positive data, but so we met the negative data. So we have to clarify to take the negative data. How do you think about the clarify the negative data? How do you think about?
I think the negative data are sometimes even more useful than positive data because it helps us to exclude the big piece of the cake from our research and help us to narrow much more our research purposes. So we shouldn't be totally sad when we have negative data, but sometimes they are very, very useful to research effort to look for positive data. So sometimes negative data also should be welcome and not make us sad and proceed with our motivation despite the negative data. This is my opinion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I will add to that, sometimes the negative data is published too. So if you have a negative data which shows that your study is not inferior to an established process, or if it did not achieve what is already the standard of care, even then it can be published. It depends on how you present it in publication. Professor Kostadin.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kumar. First of all, thanks to Niccolò for his excellent story of purpose and description of how the young neurosurgeon is working. That somehow reminds me also some early years in my life. I definitely agree that negative data, to comment on the details, negative data are very important at a certain point. I will also mention that, for instance, a journal like PLOS ONE is inviting negative data, which are important because often they are rejected from other journals. So we have to consider that options too. Now, in the practice of your early research, how do you find, Niccolò, the definition at the beginning of the, let us say, problem, idea, concept stage? How much of that is really your own, or you are influenced by your peers in your work? How do you find that? How much is yours and how much is part of the team around you?
Well, this is an interesting question, because I luckily work in an environment with each of us has personal interests. So this is, of course, a positive thing. For example, I am mainly focused on neurotrauma and global neurosurgery, and within my department, none of my colleagues have the same interests. So on one side, this is positive, because it helps me to grow my research area, my niche, as I mentioned before, but also has some limitations because it's more difficult to find inspiration from peers within my local network. So due to some past experience I had abroad, I created my networks with my peers, not locally, but on distance. So I have colleagues to collaborate with that are not only in my department, but are mainly outside of my department and also outside of Italy. So I think that with the possibilities of connection that we have today, we have the possibility to connect and to grow our networks with colleagues with the same interests outside of our departments, and to grow bigger and together, despite in our environment maybe we don't have somebody with our same interests. Yes.
Thank you very much.
This is how I did.
Completely agree, and I think this will be also giving a lesson to the other young surgeons that are listening to us now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see, Ben, you have a question.
Yes, just a quick question, and thank you for your presentation, very good. And just now some Alberto mentioned about that, for example, they can discuss with the statisticians about the use of which statistical test to be used in the study. But in some setting, like for some young neurosurgeons, they don't have the statisticians to discuss with. So what is your advice to them to choose the appropriate statistical test for particular studies?
Okay, thank you for the question. Personally, when I started with my first researches, I tried to do the statistics on my own. So there are indeed on YouTube's podcasts, there are several tools to try to learn to do the statistics on your own. But personally, I mean, on my experience, I had very strong difficulties in doing the statistics of my own. So I decided to give up on this because I realized that the data that I got were not reliable. And I lost time in doing the statisticians, but I am not a statistician, I am a neurosurgeon. So I tried to seek professional figures to help me. The advice for the young researcher, and in my department, we don't have statisticians locally. So I think for the advice for the youngest is to try to create networks, because maybe you don't know directly a statistician that can help you, but maybe you know somebody to involve in your study that can connect you to a statistician that can help you. So with creating networks, you can get the statisticians that you need that will help you in your specific research study, but will be a friend also for the future studies that you can do. So the statisticians I work with, I never met her personally, but I met her by connecting with somebody else I connected. So this is my advice for youngest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that is a very important point for young neurosurgeons to get hold of the right kind of people if they are doing that kind of research. For example, if you're trying to write an original article where you are studying a prospective or a retrospective phenomena, I think it's important to also see if a librarian, for example, is available. So again, now this is such a big difference between for LMICs versus here and also in Europe. A librarian is available for you. So if you ask them to say, I want to do a literature search, can you please help me? So to get your search strategy aligned and to see what's already there, a librarian will come, and then they will be also part of your team. And sometimes the librarian wants to be on the authorship as well, which is not wrong actually. They have kind of modified your research from 1,000 articles to 10 articles. So I think it's very important to involve them as well. But again, this is something which is different from, it varies from country to country. But I think using a statistician and a librarian, if your research question is very wide and very broad and involves a lot of literature which already exists, is a good idea. So that's very important, because you don't want to focus, as Dr. Nicholas said, on statistics. You would rather focus on your results and the clinical applicability of the same. Any other question? Because we had a very good session today on clinical research and its applications. If anyone has any other question or comment.
May I ask Professor Kato, any comments from you on the advice on the research method on young surgeons?
Thanks so much. So I think today's discussions are a bit high level for developing countries doctors, because ACNS itself is we focus on the YNS from a developing country, especially in Asia. And 𝑑𝒓𝒐𝒂𝒂, he created the ACNS. Of course, the ACNS itself is not high, maybe the middle class journal, I think, because the Kano sensei, that he really wanted to the young doctors from developing countries to push to write the paper, then apply, submit the ACNS. That is his main purpose, and also his wish. I think today, unfortunately, even my fellow, one come from the Nigeria, one come from Namibia, one come from Ethiopia, and so many Africans right now, but they could not attend this wonderful meeting. I don't know that they went somewhere, because Japan is Golden Week now, so the holidays. So I think maybe in the near future, I think maybe we can have such kind of round discussion among viewers and YNS. They must listen. And also, I think they should have such kind of a habit, because my teacher, some of my teacher, he pushed us to read at least one paper before you go to bed. And also, once you present some paper, even a local small meeting, Otani Sensei mentioned about even the case report, immediately after make a paper. That is such kind of the habit is very, very important from the beginning, from the resident. That is my small suggestion for YNS. If YNS is listening to this webinar, but anyway, Dr. Albert and also the Raja and also the people, thank you very much for nice guidance for YNS. Otani Sensei and the consultant sensei, of course, association. Thank you very much for this guidance. And also the Anyak, please don't forget. Now we have a lady neurosurgeon from Nigeria. Anyak, maybe I can tell you later the name and the email. And also she is a very good singer.
Oh,
Very good singer, yes, yes. I'm astonished. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Ashish, yes.
Thank you, Professor
Arigato.
Kato. Ben, I would like to invite
Yeah,
Ben
Ben.
for adding concluding remarks.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Professor Kato, for your kind words. And so I think if there's no further comments, then it's about the end of today's section. Today, indeed, as mentioned by Professor Kumar, I would like to echo that it's a very meaningful section to the young neurosurgeons. And this concludes the second episode of the special session on research in the ACNS YNS webinar series. And again, I think we all learned so much from these and gained the experience from the professors with a lot of experience in research, and the advice are valid to all of us. So again, thank you all of you for joining us today, and it's the end of the session. I would like to thank Professor Kumar for chairing this section, and also Professor Alberto, and also Raja, and also Dr. Cruz for giving the speech today. And also thank you, Professor Otani Sensei, and also Professor Brisset, and also Professor Constantine to take a role as a discussant in this section. And I would also like to thank Professor 𝒏𝒏 for broadcasting this webinar on the WeChat session. Today we have around 228 people watching on the WeChat sections. So again, it's a bye-bye to all of us, and I would like to thank you, all of you, to join us today, and hope to see you next time in the ACNS YNS webinar. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Arigato gozaimasu.